Okay, we're on. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us on our Facebook Live today. My name is Bianca Cervantes. I am the Communications Director at Workforce Solutions Borderplex. And joining us today is our very own CEO, Leila H. Melendez, who's going to be having a discussion with me today about the new living wage that we announced to media officially today. So we're calling it a living wage, but more recently we're realizing this is closer to what we should be calling a family wage because it does impact families, and it's a very exact number that we've calculated for El Paso. Now, Leila's going to explain exactly how we come down to this very exact dollars and cents number when it comes to your hourly wages for El Paso.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us and for taking interest in this very important topic. And I want to say that this is not the first time or the first year that we set a living wage. This is something that we do on an annual basis. We have a set methodology. It's very well thought out and considered and discussed within the organization and certainly amongst our board of directors and certainly amongst the workforce industry. So I want to preface it with explaining why exactly we feel we need to have a living wage definition at Workforce Solutions Borderplex. So we have federal workforce training dollars. Workforce boards, this is what we do. We help people find opportunities to upskill and to get into better jobs. That is our entire purpose as an organization. And so we have dollars that we can utilize to help individuals that are eligible enroll into training programs. So when we then look at all of the different training programs that are in the market, whether here locally or regionally, we want to be very mindful because we don't have an endless pot of money. We have a finite number of dollars that we can spend every year. How do we maximize those funds? How do we make them go as far as possible and have the biggest impact? How do you get the biggest bang for the buck? We do that at a personal budget level. We do that at an organization level as well. We have to be very mindful about what we are going to do with our resources and how to maximize them. So we want to be really strategic, not only for the organization, but in the participants and the folks that come to us for help in getting a better job and getting skilled. So we want to set a baseline, a floor or a minimum place for where individuals can develop from. And so this is why we have developed this living wage dollar amount, because when we look at the occupations that are being trained for, all of the different training programs and the types of jobs that those training programs create, we want to encourage and enroll people into jobs that pay at least this living wage. And that living wage is an amount that a person needs as an individual or for their family to no longer require government subsidies, which is the goal. Ultimately, our goal as individuals, as positively contributing members of society, is to be independent and self-sustaining. So what is that level? What is that threshold? And we have calculated that to be a living wage. We take into account the size of the households in the region and also the costs of what it takes to live. What are all of the costs that we spend on to live? Housing, transportation, food, amenities, childcare, etc. And we calculate that, and then we come up with this formula. So it's a math problem, and we come up with this formula and the answer every year based on what those costs are, inflation, etc. Every year we get to this dollar amount. And so this year we define that living wage is $14.39 per hour for an individual. Now we've described this as a household of three, assuming that a household has two adults and one child, then that household needs twice that amount to support the entire family. Again, without government subsidy programs, which is the goal. So we want to enroll people into our participants into training programs where they can start at $14.39 and grow from there.
And I just, as people are joining and watching, I want to encourage anybody that's watching to ask questions on the comments, because we're readily available to answer them. And I know my biggest question when this first came out is, you hear 1439 and then you think of the current minimum wage that we have right now at 725. So there's a huge gap between that. And my biggest question, is I'm sure is the audience's biggest question, is how do you even begin to explain to workers, to employers, businesses, and even to city leaders that our minimum wage, our living wage is almost double that of what the minimum wage is. What do we need to do to start inching away from that poverty wage of 725 and making it something that's not only more socially acceptable, but even embraced and advocated for?
Well, I think what's really important is that and the reason we describe it as a living wage is because that's exactly what it is. It is not, when you calculate this as an annual amount, it is still less than $30,000 a year for an individual. And when you think about all of the responsibilities that an adult has, especially with a child or with another household member, getting by on that amount is it's unfathomable. You question like how anybody can do that. And so it then becomes a conversation in the how do we help businesses adapt these dollars and these wages into their business model. There are definitely points on both sides of the issue, and I can understand it's complex. It's not a very easy answer, and it's not something that's done from overnight. It's a progression, really. That's what ends up happening, and that's what we want, and that's where but a progression that starts from a certain point. So we use that point as 1439. So we do want to have this conversation as a community about how do we help businesses absorb those costs, and then grow from there. And there's a whole economic cycle behind that. Is the higher the earnings, then the more an individual is able to afford and to spend on the things that they need to live, the basic household needs. So you see an increase in independence and a decrease in dependency on government programs, which are funded by us. So the individuals that are us as society, we are also contributing to that the enabling and contributing to that 725 minimum wage right now, because we're paying for that gap in all of the services that is being made up with.
Absolutely. That money's got to come from somewhere, right? And I mean, whether it's SNAP, TANF, or other types of housing assistance, that's what's making up that gap. Absolutely. And just to kind of give the big picture as to what 1439 comes out to be, for an individual, it's an annual salary of $29,939. When you consider two adults, it's $59,879. So about $60,000 for a couple, for two adults living in a household with a child. And that varies per person when you start considering different size households. And you can head over to our website, borderplexjobs.com, and click on this story, and you'll be able to click on the actual MIT living wage calculator, which is where we gather this methodology from. These numbers come from that living wage calculator. And if you're an individual adult just living by yourself, you'll see that there's obviously a different living wage for you, because it's just you supporting yourself. So it varies. But again, as Leila mentioned, we use the model of a family of three, two adults and one child, because that's the average that you see here in El Paso. So I want to bring up, it's a gradual thing that we're going to have to work on, obviously, to get to the $14.39 an hour. And I want to bring up a case study of the city of Seattle, who actually passed a law back in 2014, 2015 about getting the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. So it's been incremental. It's taken some progress, but it's actually been successful in the sense that it's contributing back to the economy and growing the economy. So it's still a case study, but it's also a city that inspired many other cities and municipalities to consider a baseline for a minimum wage that allows you to get your basic needs. It sounds so simple, right? Get paid what you can, to survive. But what steps, Leila, do you think that we need to make as an organization and as a community when it comes to our community partners, our stakeholders, and even our workers to start getting ourselves into that where 1439 is the norm and it's not just a jaw-dropping number for everybody that's listening?
So I also want to remind the viewers is that I'm in charge of an organization and a budget. And in that budget, I have to factor in the costs of wages as well. And so I may not be a business, a for-profit business, but I still have personnel costs and labor costs. And I also actually did attempted to start a business a few years ago on my own. So I absolutely understand and respect the perspective from those decision makers on how to do that. But I think that that's where we start, is how do we build our business plans and our business models with these dollar amounts moving the floor from the basement to this level, and then building the business model from that point on versus much further below than you think. Because if we start our business models at that very at a basement dollar amount, at a poverty wage, then it makes it harder to sustain. There's other implications that the business model has to go through. For example, turnover. We've seen a lot of businesses where they suffer a really high turnover rate because they are paying lower wages than their competition. So that turnover rate, it actually is costing them. Businesses may think that they're saving personnel costs, but it's actually more expensive to turn over and to be constantly in this cycle of recruiting in and recruiting out employees. So having that conversation with our businesses, providing some technical assistance and some support and guidance and business coaching on how to do that and how to reform and restructure business plans and business models to support that wage is the first step.
And I know that, I mean, it's obviously not an overnight thing. We're going to have to take some time to get to that point and buy-in from everybody around us. But there's padding, I guess we could call it, to assist workers and to at least help accommodate those that aren't on living wage at the moment. And we've been referring to them the past year as the new bennies, which have been coming up ever since the pandemic. We suddenly have been facing these new waves of benefits for employers, not your typical gym membership, not just your typical healthcare. We have new things that are coming in that can, at least for the moment, provide some type of net for those individuals that are trying to get by and survive on lower wages. But tell me a little bit about what you consider to be the new benefits that employers should be considering overall.
Absolutely. So there are multiple examples, and there's a lot of individuals that we've spoken to. But I remember when my daughter was an infant and I enrolled her into childcare, and my husband and I made the decision of who was going to absorb that cost. And it was, it was on my dime, in other words, and we shared other responsibilities. But that's one example of a decision that is being made today. Before people are returning to work, they're weighing the cost. Just like businesses have a cost of doing business, families have a cost of going to work.
Yes.
So if I'm going to go to work, it's going to cost me in childcare, it's going to cost me in fuel, it's going to cost me in lunch and groceries and food to go to work. So what is that cost? And is it going to be less or more than what I'm earning? And if it's going to cost me more than what I'm earning, then why am I going to, I'm going to be in a deficit. So, and I think that's something that is happening right now is because costs are going up and wages are not going up. People are making those decisions and saying, why am I going to work if I'm not going to be able to afford the basics? We're going to figure other things out. I'm not going to go back to work, so then I'm not going to need childcare and I'm not going to need fuel, which ends up having a negative effect on the economy. So then we're having less fuel consumption, less spending and things like that. So it ends up, it does have a different effect on the economy overall. And I think we're still in the midst of that. We are seeing people return to jobs. The unemployment rate is declining. So people are going to work, but they're not necessarily going back to the jobs that they had before. There's a lot of cross-industry placement happening where individuals that worked in one industry are now making a leap and going into a completely different industry. So, the numbers are still not out totally on 2020 and the first part of 2021 and what that looks like and where people are ending up and actually getting employed. It's going to be a very interesting picture when we get that data. And I think we're going to be in this cycle and this uncertainty for several quarters until we finally start to stabilize. But some of those new bennies are not necessarily just that $1 an hour. It's actually people taking multiple jobs and several and different shifts and shorter shifts and doing project based or telework, what have you. So there is not one norm anymore. We used to all be most of us used to be in a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 norm. That's not the case anymore. So there's not any more one norm. Everybody is finding a solution that works for them and their family.
It's almost like a custom tailored career pathway, and that workers kind of have leverage on at this point in this worker movement. I'm seeing things like in the job fairs that we're hosting, employers having to get creative to attract talent. And that's doing things like allowing for working from home more frequently, allowing flexible schedules, because especially families, because you consider the school schedules that don't align very well with work schedules, and having that ability to let me drop my kid off at school and then I can work, and that being like, okay, that works for us. As long as the productivity is maintained, if not boosted, it's not a bad deal. What else are we seeing? We're seeing childcare benefits. Actually, some of them are local, but we're also doing some research on other cities and what practices are being implemented when it comes to the issue of childcare, because like you said, it's an overhead cost for the family business. And you're seeing things like employers build childcare stations in their facility, or even offer things like childcare stipends if that person isn't eligible for childcare benefits from the state. So there's a lot going on, and we're actually going to be implementing a lot of educating the community and especially the businesses when it comes to best practices for working families and parents. We want to facilitate the childcare situation. I don't know if you have anything to weigh in on that one, Leila.
I do. I think it's COVID has really disrupted the way that we see things, that we were in just this cycle of status quo. And I remember asking myself, why am I dropping my daughter off at school in the dark? Who thought that this bell schedule and work schedule, did anybody ever talk to one another about these things? The two systems, the work system and the school system, we're all the same people. We're all parents, we're all workers in it, but we did not align those things. And right now that alignment is being forced. And it's being forced by us, the users of it. And so, and I think it's completely reasonable. And I think when we look at the conversations that families or that workers want to have, whether it's around their families or around their educational goals, if there may be students that are pursuing their after high school or post-secondary higher education, and they have goals and they want more flexibility, those are things that we want. They're doing the right thing. They are going to school. They are prioritizing their family. Ultimately, those are excellent things that are contributing to the fabric of our society. And us as employers have a great opportunity to support that and enable that and encourage more of that, if we just listen and are willing to accommodate that. Because I think in the long term, it's going to have I think even in the short term, it's going to have some great benefits to the business. I'm seeing that for sure as an organization, our productivity, the way that we have learned to communicate, a whole bunch of things that we as an organization of just 48 individuals have learned over the last 18 months. So I think that there's there's a lot more there if we are just willing to accommodate and make those little adjustments for one another.
Absolutely. And speaking of accommodations, we're just rolling out a program that in partnership with TWC is accommodating service industry workers. It's a service industry recovery when it comes to childcare. And if you haven't heard yet, and we're really about to start blowing this up, so you're going to hear about it, we have countless slots available for free childcare for service industry workers. That's right. 100% free childcare. Your eligibility status is just the fact that you need to be a service industry worker. So we have more information on that available on our website. If you have questions, you can contact us directly as well. Just head over to our website or ask us through Facebook messaging. We'll get through to you. But we are taking enrollment right now. The slots are available and there is a lot of support coming in from that.
Okay.
And I guess to close up, I don't know that we received any questions, but that's okay, because we're going to be sending this video out to media and I'm sure that we'll be getting questions then. But I just want to close up on a positive note of what once in a perfect world, once this living wage does become the norm and does become what everybody's getting paid, at least at the minimum, what are some of the benefits that the El Paso economy will start to see?
Well, so the first thing is stabilization of a family, of families and of households. And so you start to see more individuals able to buy groceries, be able to have food on the table, have healthy food on the table, have clothes to go to school and buy school supplies, and fuel to get to work. And so all of those things then perpetuate and they contribute to the economy. And if families are buying clothes and buying food, then the workers at those stores then have a job, and people that work at the fuel stations have jobs. And so it just, we contribute to one another's economic cycle. And ultimately at the end of the day, families are stronger and become more resilient for it. And then they can build from there. So the ground that they are on is solid and firmer, and they are able to grow from there. And that is where we absolutely want to play a constant role and be a partner and a resource for families, not just to get you to that floor of 1439, but to help you stay there, stabilize, and then move you up from that point. That's through upskilling, to enrolling you in a class. And only when you feel that your ground is stable are you able to then think of a healthy future. And that's what we want for all of our residents here in the community.
It's that hierarchy of needs. Can you define, somebody mentioned in the comments, multiplier effect? Is there anything that you have to say about that?
That's probably one of our research analysts. So the multiplier effect is just that, is that, for every one person that contributes to, the dollars that you make are then spent on the things that you buy and the things that you so it's a rolling, it's like a ripple effect, right? It has exponential. It doesn't just stop. The money that you get and the paycheck that you earn does not stop here. It actually starts here. It starts here and it rolls on and it multiplies, and it then creates, it's like, this is going to show my age, but the gremlins, where they multiply. So you spend here and that dollar then gets multiplied and gets spent somewhere else, et cetera, because it's like a marathon or a race, a relay race. You pass that dollar on to the next person, and it goes from there. And so that is the multiplier effect that happens. The more batons you have, the more dollars that you have, the more you're able to pass on and multiply from there. So having 7 relays or 7 relay batons, $7 an hour versus $14 an hour, that's twice as many of them, resources that you have to spend and more multiply into the economy. So I hope that I was able to describe it in a visual way versus in a dictionary way.
Absolutely. I'm already thinking a Chewy gremlin running around. We're going home with dollars instead of
multiply Chewies. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great definition. So we'll definitely be educating the community throughout the rest of the year as far as what living wages and what they're, what we need to get to. We'll be posting a lot on our social media campaign as to what a living wage can afford an actual family when it comes to groceries, when it comes to the type of home they can live in, the type of recreation they can have, enjoy, quality of life as a family in various wages, whether it's minimum wage, living wage, and above that. And we're really going to visually see and tell that story as to what we can get out of salary. So stay with us with our social media, and just keep watching us on our interviews on KVIA, on KTSM. We're constantly on there just trying to let the community know what's going on with the workforce. So thanks for joining us, Leila, unless you have any final words.
No, that's it. Thanks for following us and for thinking that we are that we're of interest. Thanks for taking an interest in the work that we do, and for the community support.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. Goodbye.
Right. Thanks.